We knew the horror still lay before us, waiting as impatiently as a demanding and very angry maiden on her wedding night. But this bride was different, and I could not help but imagine her in a gown of crimson rather than white. Her flowers, the gowns of her handmaidens, even the groom would wear blood red for this occasion. For we all knew that death was pounding at our door, demanding an immediate audience, but it would have to wait and was not happy about it. Before all of this began, about a year ago, she had begun to have nightmares that she could not understand. At first they frightened her, and she would only sleep during the day, as if being in the bright sunlight was a refuge somehow. They were persistent in their attack on her mind, her psyche, and had she been able to make any sense of them, she might have changed some things in her life, for they were a broken promise of some terrible evil in her future. In one nightmare, she was being led to the middle of the main square where they held town meetings, debates, enacted new laws to govern the land. She had tried to save herself a shred of dignity and dress when they came for her, but they took her in the early hours of the morning. It was as if they were racing the sunlight because they had something terrible in mind, something that would not stand in the light of day. All she could think of was that they would come to their senses soon, and realizing their mistake, release her with profound apologies. Now she was a prisoner, led along the crowd, and then standing at the fringe, she felt a shift in the wind, as if things were suddenly going to change. As her eyes swept the crowd for some kind of understanding, she saw something new. She knew it was not there the last time she was here. It was only a few days ago. Looking up at the twin beams of wood, her eyes followed the rope alongside and then gasped at what she saw. She tried to say no, but nothing came out. She had never seen a guillotine before, but she knew that's what it was. The wicked blade seemed to shine in the early morning brightness of that day. Yet it even now appeared to be dripping blood taken from victims that numbered higher than she cared to count. Trying not to look, she felt compelled to look into the empty basket and saw that blood had dripped from the blade above her and soaked into its woven strands, then into the ground below it. Then the last of the crowd stepped aside and she saw me being led in handcuffs, shuffling along as the guard hurried me, but I had to take small steps because my legs were also bound together. Even from far off, she could see that the guards had had their fun with me. My arms were bruised and bleeding, and there was a large welt on the right side of my face where I had been hit repeatedly. My clothes were filthy and torn and hung off my frame like rags, covered with dirt and blood. She could also see as I got closer that the chains that bound my wrists and ankles had worn into my skin. It was raw and bloody in both places. As they brought me forth, she could see me trying to look around the crowd, trying to find a friendly face in a sea of hostility. She thought then that they had given me some kind of drug or sedative. I didn't seem to be fully aware of what was going on, what danger I was in. When she tried to shout out to them of my innocence, she found that she had lost her voice as well, probably so she could not warn me or give me any words of comfort. It was clear they wanted nothing to interfere with their plans. Then, without being told, one of the guards stepped forward and hit the back of my legs. Another leaned me forward so they could place my head in the restraints. She felt her eyes as they rose to that terribly sharp blade as it hung up there, hanging high over my head, and she began to pray for me, for she didn't know what else to do. Then, as the blade glistened in the low light, she looked to the east again, hoping the sun would rise faster than it seemed to be willing to rise now. Shading her eyes, she thought the first rays of the morning sun were about to rise over the nearby mountaintops. She shouted as it burned its way into her heart, pointing at it, but no one was paying her any attention. Instead, they were focusing on my impending death. Without warning, she heard a loud clap and looked up as the blade fell and lopped off my head, severing artery and bone without hesitation. She imagined my eyes going out as the parts of my brain were switched off, the signals sent but nothing left to receive them as I died. Then she watched in horror as my head slowly pitched forward and almost landed in the basket, but instead it hit the edge and bounced out. Though it was what they had all come to see, they all moved back as they screamed in horror, afraid it might touch them and stain their souls with my blood, as if that might curse them and their generations to come. They all watched as my head rolled forward, pitching end over end as it went along until it hit her toes and then stopped. My blood trailed a crimson streak across her gown as it flew out of my neck, just nicking the edge of her gown and covering her throat with the warm fluid that had been in my body just moments ago. She could not tear her eyes from the side of my face, now ashen white and bruised over my cheeks and forehead. She saw my tongue as it lolled out of my mouth. My eyes rolled back so far that only the white showed now, my blood oozing out and staining the ground at her feet.